Good morning. Good morning. Here we go. Yeah, here we go. On Instagram, I've got some things set up here so that I'm like, I love how the mic is in the picture, but my laptop won't recognize my mic. Yeah, it looks like I'm using a mic, but I'm not. Or an external mic. I'm not. No. Laptop won't recognize it. So annoying. Good morning, Instagram. You're welcome to the, like, weird proportions. You're welcome. I'm so amazing at this. So amazing. Maybe if I'll sit up a little higher and then Instagram. I won't be like, taking up so much space. Hey. Ooh, it's noon now. Hello. It's noon. Welcome. Welcome, welcome to some live office hours with me, Dr. Shannon Coates. Welcome. Yeah, as I said, my name is Dr. Shannon Coates. You're so welcome to call me Shannon. Unless you're one of my undergrad voice fight students, in which case Dr. C will work. I'm coming to you live here from the Voice and the Art of Teaching headquarters. To set myself up as, you know, here in the headquarters for Voice and the Art of Teaching. Yeah, that's me. Here, I am here. I am north of Toronto in 5 seconds. Let me just pull up my land acknowledgement. Thank you. So yeah, here I am north of Toronto on the traditional lands of the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, the Mississauga, and the Wendat Neowensio peoples, excuse me. Here in this area, yes. So, super looking forward to talking to you today about something that, well, something that can get a little sticky sometimes. We see some of these things, we see some of this. I'm talking today about barriers to voice teaching, and I'm talking about both the barriers that are not actually barriers, but that we often are told are barriers, as well as the actual barriers to being an effective voice teacher. You'll notice I'm not saying to being a good voice teacher, because we all know I don't love those moral absolutes, right? And we're just talking about being an effective voice teacher. So some of the barriers and some of the perceived barriers. So I put up a post yesterday about the perceived barriers to being a voice teacher. So often we will hear, and we'll see this often in, say, the forums. Again, the forums are such a source of information about how we are, where we are in the industry, the state of the industry. The Facebook forums are, they're definitely a source for that kind of information. And we'll often see in those forums, we'll see things like, oh, well, if you can't be, if you're not, well, let me read some of the barriers, the so-called barriers we've heard. So in other words, these are the things that, we'll hear people say, well, you can't be a good singing teacher. You can't be a singing teacher if, oh, hi, Courtney. You can't be a good, I got your email, by the way, and I loved it, and thank you. And it's on my list to respond today. So some of the things that we hear in the forums about, like you can't be a good singing teacher. And also these are some of the things that we singing teachers will take on, right? So we'll take on this kind of identity about ourselves and about our teaching, because we've heard somewhere that, for example, you can't be a good singing teacher, or you can't possibly be a good singing teacher if you don't have a voice degree, or say you only did a couple of years of a voice degree, or you didn't do a voice degree at all. You can't possibly be a good teacher. Love it. You can't possibly be a voice teacher, and you shouldn't be a voice teacher if you don't have a voice degree. Or what about the one that says that you can't possibly be a good voice teacher if you don't know how to sing Western classical styles? Like, you can't possibly be a good voice teacher, and or you shouldn't be a voice teacher if you don't know Western classical styles. How about if you weren't a successful performer, or you aren't a successful performer? You can't possibly teach well or work with your students, work well with students, and be a good voice teacher if you didn't have a performance career. If you don't know what it feels like to be on stage, you couldn't possibly be good at that. You don't play piano. That's a big one. I know lots and lots of voice teachers have lots of shame. I know, it hurts, right? Ooh, ouch. Lots of voice teachers have lots of shame and self-doubt around piano skills and around, well, but I can't accompany my students at festivals, or I can't, I can't play this, I can't create accompaniment tracks for my students. I can't play along with them in their lessons. I can't, blah, blah, blah. There's lots of shame around piano skills. And I'll tell you, that's also one of the things that when I'm teaching my undergraduate voice ped class, this comes up every single year in my undergraduate voice ped class, where they're like, okay, second semester, and the whole first semester they're like, I'm going to have to teach in second semester. I'm going to have to teach. The teaching project's coming. I'm going to have to teach. I'm going to have to teach. They're going to find out that I can't play piano. Like, they're going to find out that I can't play piano. I'm going to be... putting myself up. Yes, I know. It's a big roadblock, right? It can be, and like I said, I end up every year with students who are sitting through the entire first half of the class, like the entire first semester, scared out of their minds about that second semester where they know they're going to be teaching, and they also know that they can't play piano as well as their high school voice teacher did, or as well as whoever else, or as as well as they think they should be able to, whether they, oh, ouch. There's a lot of fear and shame around that. The other one is you can't read music. So, Janae says, yeah, I have a block around this. Probably the reason I don't take advanced students. So we'll talk about that. Absolutely, we'll talk about that. There's a big block around, if you can't read music, then how could you possibly be a good voice teacher? How could you possibly be a voice teacher if you can't read music? There's lots of so those were just a few of the blocks. And if I missed one that is particularly, or that I won't say that is particularly relevant to you. How about if I missed one that you have heard, or that you know of, a barrier that you know of or have heard of, feel free to throw it in the comments there so that I can get it in there as well. But so lots of barriers. Those are some of the main barriers that I have heard, and that I've said myself. Let's be perfectly honest here. I have said this myself. One of the big thing, I've said, if you don't have a voice degree, I mean, this is a while ago. If you don't have a voice degree, then how can you possibly know how to teach voice? Like, if you haven't done voice lessons at this level, then how could you know how to teach voice, right? I've said this. And I have had a lot of, when I first started to teach, I was very aware of my limitations as a piano player. I actually went back and did some, don't have any experience. Yes, exactly. That's also can be a barrier, right? Well, you've never taught before. You can't possibly teach. How am I supposed to get the experience to teach if I can't teach? How am I supposed to become an experienced voice teacher if I can't teach? Yes, that is totally something that we've been told before, right? Like, oh, you shouldn't be teaching. You don't have any experience. How does that compute? I had when I first started to teach, and I thought, okay, well, I can't necessarily accompany my students, but I am also one of those kinds of people who says, yeah, I'll probably figure this out anyway. So I am definitely one of those kind of people, That's so true, Tiffany. There's very little instruction about how to teach voice. Yep, absolutely. I would say too that that some of these blocks that we have, some of these barriers, especially these perceived barriers, I would say that these are some of the things that actually block people from from coming to someone like me or someone to get voice ped training, right? So I would say that these not only are these barriers things where we're carrying around this like guilt around like, ooh, but I don't have a voice degree, or ooh, I don't have a Western classical voice degree. I've never sung Western classical. I've only ever sung in choirs, or I've only ever, I've never, right? We carry these things around, and these, not only can they be barriers to us as teachers, to being our most effective teacher because we're carrying the guilt, but they can also be barriers to us seeking out the education that we need, right? Like they can be barriers to us because we feel like, ooh, I can't, like if I go to so-and-so and do a course, imposter syndrome, right? If I go to so-and-so and I do a course, or I take I want to work with so-and-so to be better at XYZ, I'll address that in a minute, Valerie. Yeah, then they're going to find out that I shouldn't be teaching, and they're going to tell me that I shouldn't actually be teaching because I don't have XYZ, right? So like here, it puts independent voice teachers in a bind because we've got this thing in our head that says, well, I probably shouldn't be teaching, and I don't want anybody to find out that I shouldn't really be teaching anyway. So like I can't go talk to someone. Right? Yes. Yeah, Courtney's saying, just jump in, do it. But that can be a real barrier. And this is something that, I hear all the time in practicums when I'm working with voice teachers. All the time I hear this from voice teachers saying, I feel so validated here because I kind of always thought that maybe I shouldn't be teaching. And so here I am, like I stepped up and I took the courage and I went into, the elitist mindset. Yes, who else is going to be in the course? Are the other people in the course going to be, like super experienced and have like all these degrees and like, et cetera, and then I'm in here and then they're going to be like, oh, you shouldn't be in here? Totally. So these barriers become not just barriers, to us as voice teachers doing our best work because we're carrying this guilt, but they also become the barrier to us actually going and getting the stuff we need. Valerie asked, what is Western classical? And that I use that language really intentionally to talk about, to describe what we would in North America and Western Europe, what we would call just classical music. So classical, and the reason that I use Western in front of that classical to describe classical, to just delineate that I'm talking about Western classical music, is because there are lots of other cultures in the world that have classical music as well. So when I say classical music, I want you to know that I mean Western classical music, not like Eastern classical music, or there are lots of other forms of Southeast Asian classical music, for example. So there are other forms. So they're also saying, the elitist mindset seems really prevalent in the Western classically trained music world. Yes, I agree, Tiffany. I totally agree that it is quite prevalent. So, oh, you're welcome. So those barriers are there. We know that there are things that are in the, in the zeitgeist of the teaching world, and again, we see those on, the forums all the time. Folks like Brenda Earl Stokes, who has, who has courses about how to play piano better as a voice teacher. So she does, I'll tag her in here as well. She has courses for voice teachers, specifically for voice teachers, to up your piano skills. And she will advertise those, or, she'll talk about those in some of the forums. And then people in the forums will say things like, well, if you don't have piano skills, you shouldn't be teaching voice. Like literally saying that. She's like, okay, we're not here to judge. I'm here to offer this thing. Anywho, Allison says, it took me 3 years to accept it was okay to even take that first student. Thought my piano skills made me inferior, then realized a bunch of instrumental teachers I knew all didn't play much more than I did. Exactly. Yes, exactly. We have this we have this thing going on in our brains that this is the way that these barriers are real. And I want to say, I think that some of these barriers are there, in many cases, I think with the best intentions, right? Like they have been set up in many cases with the best of intentions, where we all know students who have, and we are all likely students who are singers who have had, who have had damage through taking voice lessons, who have had things not go right. And so in so many ways we're often creating these barriers because we are trying to protect students. So we're trying to protect students from charlatans, from people who are out there teaching with not good intentions and who are damaging. So we're trying to protect students, but this is an unregulated industry and there's no way to do that, A. And B, so I had 5 voice teachers in my teens before I went to the university to my undergraduate degree in performance voice. So thank you. Yes, there is there definitely is a lot of trauma in this industry. And so I had 5 voice teachers before I went to university, and then in university I had 2 voice teachers in my undergraduate degree. And the teachers who I studied with in my independent, the independent voice teachers I studied with, who before I went to university, there was a whole range of levels of experience, levels of education. So my very first singing teacher was a very experienced teacher who had lots of, she had lots of students. In fact, she actually retired the year after. It was a forced retirement. She didn't want to, but for her health, she had to retire. But so she had been teaching for quite a long time. She was very experienced. So so there was that teacher, and then I went and worked with one of her students. So her student did not have a voice degree, in fact did not have a degree at all, and had only, and was relatively new to teaching, and her main experience, my second voice teacher, was working with my first voice teacher. That was her main experience, and she hadn't had a performance career. She hadn't done, and she taught piano and voice out of her home, just down the street, actually. I should see whether she's still around. I don't know. She might still be. I don't know. And so that, this is going back a ways. But so that was my second voice teacher, and then my third voice teacher had a degree and was a regular performer, and she had been teaching a while, and she was also an RCM examiner. And then my fourth teacher was relatively new to teaching, but had a degree and was also, and also had done some performing, but had mostly moved out of performing to teach. And then my fifth teacher had a singing degree, but she was much older, and so she had a lot more experience, and so then she was also, she worked, but anyway, yes. And then I went to university, and I had two teachers at university, both of whom had quite extensive singing careers, and had their, one of whom did not have a degree, who was very old school, so kind of got into the industry, sang before having a degree was really a thing, and started singing very young, like was a professional singer by like 19 or something like that. So like I've had a broad range of voice teachers in my youth, a broad range of voice teachers. And I can tell you that having a degree and or having a performance career does not mean that you are not going to cause damage. Doesn't mean that you're going to be the best teacher ever. It just does not mean that. Yes, so Allison, this is going back quite a ways, and this specific teacher came in directly out of quite a large performance career, but this is sort of way back in the day. This teacher was close to retirement when I started to take voice lessons with her, and so yes, this was. At the time, she wasn't really an anomaly. There were lots of folks teaching at the time who didn't have a degree, but of course things have changed now. But I'm here to tell you that the folks who had degrees had the potential to cause just as much damage as the folks who did not. Grandfathered in, exactly. The folks who had lots of experience had the potential to cause just as much damage as the folks who did not. There were damaging things happening across studios, across boundaries, across teachers. Their ability to play piano or not, their ability to, their relative, degree or not, all of these things across the board. The level of damage that is possible and the level of effective teaching that is possible is and was absolutely not predicated on any of these things that I just talked about. And I know this from personal experience. I know this from studying with many different kinds of teachers with many levels of experience and many levels of education and lots of different levels of ability to play. The possibility for damage is the same across the board. And in fact, in some cases, having a Western classical degree, the beliefs that might come with having a Western classical degree, having had a performance career, having super phenomenal piano skills, having all of those things, those can sometimes be the thing that is damaging. Those can sometimes be the thing that is causing damage in your students. One of my most experienced teachers along the way, wonderful, wonderful person, wonderful teacher, wonderful person, was not an effective teacher in many ways and for many students. So for many students, this person was a very effective teacher. For some specific kinds of students, a very effective teacher, very well-known career. And then for some other students, not effective at all. So, yes, okay, yeah, Courtney says it's a human thing. We're all to be held responsible for what we do and say in the room, regardless of our experience in education, which is why we are working so hard to be student-centered, not harming and intentional. Exactly, exactly. And Allison says, this whole conversation hits me so emotionally, like letting go of that, yes, and forgiving yourself for that thing that has been haunting you. Yes, yes, yes. That's what this is about today, certainly, is about confronting some of the barriers or some of the things that we have taken on ourselves. Thank you, Janae. Yes, I think so too. That we have taken on ourselves and that the industry has put on, and saying, okay, is this actually a barrier to me being an effective teacher? Is not having a Western classical degree, not being trained in Western classical styles, is that actually a barrier for me being an effective teacher? Well, if you want to teach Western classical styles, it probably is. But if you are an independent voice teacher, I'm going to guess that the vast majority of the folks in your studio don't want to sing Western classical music. So then, is not having learned Western classical music yourself a barrier? No, not in the least is that a barrier. Not at all. It's not a barrier at all. If you personally don't sing Western classical styles and you personally did not learn how to sing Western classical styles, that is not a barrier. If you have students coming into your studio who specifically want to learn Western classical styles, amazing. Say to them, I've got this incredible partner, colleague, friend over here on this other, in this other studio who you're going to go and see for like one lesson a week, or sorry, one lesson a month. You can set up a collegial relationship with the folks who teach the thing that you don't know. By the same token, when I was teaching more in a more traditional voice studio, independent voice studio, when I had students who wanted to sing jazz, I called my friend Nikki Loney to come, who has a jazz degree, and other, I know a few other people too, but I'd just like to throw Nikki Loney out there. And asked her to come in and work with my students, because I don't know jazz, and I don't pretend to know jazz. Now, I have worked with a lot of professional jazz singers, but not on style. I'm working with jazz singers to free up some things and to like figure out how to like access some things that they aren't necessarily sure how to do themselves, right? Like that's a whole other thing. I'm not teaching jazz style, no. So I'm gonna call on my fabulous colleague to do this to help me out. No-brainer. That is a no-brainer, right? If you don't have a music degree, okay, so let me read you something. Being trained and having a degree are not the same thing. It's so true, so true. And Tiffany says too, a lot of us start out teaching the way we were taught, for better or worse. Absolutely true, Tiffany. I think, and Allison, see, jazz is her fave. So I don't know it well enough to teach it, so I don't, and that's okay, right? Like, yeah, teach what you know for sure. And I wanted to also read one of the comments that Kate Fraser-Neely, who, gosh, the love, put on to this post as well. I just wanted to have it out there in the real world. She says, in response to the post that I put with all of these barriers listed, she said, yes, this all depends on the teacher's inner motivations, which we're going to talk about in a minute. What are actual barriers to being an effective voice teacher? We're going to talk about that in a minute. My mom never went to college and hardly plays piano, and there were many years she didn't perform outside the church choir, didn't go to Nats things, never took continuing ed except through private lessons in Choristers Guild. Best kick-ass voice teacher ever. Right? Best kick-ass voice teacher ever. All of these so-called barriers are not actual barriers. So let's talk about a few of the things that, a few of the ways around. So if you're not a terrific piano player, so what? So what? First of all, you can take some courses with someone like Brenda. Again, I'll tag her in the there, and there are a couple of other people out there who do the same thing. I think my friend Sven does this kind of similar work as well. So there are folks out there who, if you want to increase your piano skills, if you want to feel better about your piano skills, great. There's lots of ways to do that. Especially if you're working in an independent voice, exactly, Tiffany, exactly. The access to backing tracks that we have right now, YouTube, you can buy the accompaniment app. We have so much access to backing tracks right now that you can use those. This is fine. I pinky swear this is fine. I promise you, you can do this in your voice studio. YouTube karaoke, yes, there are so many options for students. You can pay a pianist to create a backing track for you. You can pay, like there are so many pianists out there, and you can do something like what I did. My piano skills are meh. I'm a pretty good. First of all, if there are chords, I can play it. If you give me chords, I can do anything with chords. So all the music theater and rock pop stuff that, yes, Allison's saying you've had almost the entire RCM syllabus done. Exactly. You can get backing tracks for all of the stuff that you need. And if there isn't a backing track out there, you can pay someone. And guitar, exactly. I know lots of voice teachers who teach from guitar rather than from piano. Yeah. Why? You don't have to use piano. You can use guitar and you can use your voice. Look, I know lots. So I have, as you know, I work with voice teachers, and often when I'm working with a new, yes, use mimicry, exactly. When I'm working with a new voice teacher or especially an undergrad voice ped class, often when they're teaching, if they have really terrific piano skills, often that is actually a barrier to them being an effective teacher because they're in the piano, right? So whether you have terrific skills or not terrific skills, being in the piano can be a barrier to being a voice teacher, to being an effective voice teacher. Why? They're so in the piano that they're, first of all, they're not modeling what necessarily very well, not necessarily. And secondly, their attention and focus is on like whether I'm playing the right notes, whether I'm getting the right melodies, blah, 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 and not on what's happening out here. Their eyes are in the piano rather than on the screen. I mean, a lot of this has changed up actually through the pandemic where we've been on screen and not able to use piano in the same way, right? So a lot of that has actually changed. And I worked with voice teachers, especially at the beginning of the pandemic, where we were talking through like, oh, hey, guess what? Now you have nothing to do with your hands because you can't accompany. I mean, this was right when we were doing like Zoom all the time. You can't accompany, and so now you get to actually observe your student, which you haven't really done for the last 10 years because you've been in the piano the whole time. So that can actually be a barrier, right? Being a great piano player can actually be a barrier to being an effective voice teacher. Not gonna lie, totally can, right? So there are ways that you just don't have to have phenomenal piano skills. You just don't. I pinky swear. You just don't. It's not a thing. What are some of the other ones that I put up there? Oh yeah, performance. Having those tracks completely frees you. Exactly. Yes. Yeah, Tiffany is saying that too. Pivoting to Zoom because of the pandemic and not using the keyboard to play along with a student was the best game changer. I know, it really taught so many of us how in the piano we were before. Oops. Right? It really, and also like sound differences and not having great sound and not necessarily being in the room with the student, not having that same acoustic sound. That also taught us to watch better. That taught us so much more about like kinesthetic understanding what's happening with the singer and like watching and observing. Oh yeah. It taught us a lot being on Zoom. I think in many cases it made a lot of us better teachers because we realized some of the crutches and some of the things that we kind of slid into in in-person lessons. Oh yeah. I think so. Some of the other ones, you don't hold a voice degree, you didn't learn how to sing Western classical, you aren't a successful performer. Yes, omniservational. I don't even know if that's a word, and I love it. Omniservational. You aren't a successful performer or weren't a successful performer. I think we've already covered that is just not necessarily a thing. Look, if you did not have a performance career or do not have a performance career. Yes, Allison. And sometimes we help them a little too much, right? We're a little too supportive on the piano sometimes. Sometimes we need to give them a little less support. So if you did not have a performance career or you are not performing right now and you're teaching, are there some things that I have sat in voice pedagogy summits and meetings and listened to voice pedagogues say, well, if you never had a performance career, then how can you possibly be a good teacher? You shouldn't be teaching. Now, they were referring specifically to teaching in academic institutions, right? This is kind of the older guard who aren't who are still around, but the older guard, and they're talking specifically about like teaching, because for them that's voice pedagogy, right? Where you're teaching academic Western classical music, like that is the like height of voice teaching, and there's no other voice teaching except that, oh my gosh, there's like what, a bajillion more independent voice teachers out there than there are academic teachers? Yes, the gatekeepers, exactly right, yeah. Where they're talking about like the fact that if you didn't have a degree, then you couldn't possibly, if you didn't have a performance career, how could you possibly guide someone through to a performance career? I'm here to tell you, it's possible. It is so possible. And if you feel, if you're working with someone who is, who you feel that you aren't necessarily able to give them the information or experience or whatever it is that will help them to be the performer that they need to be, you've got friends, right? You've got friends. You can say, hey, we're going to do master classes with so-and-so. I'm going to bring in so-and-so to do a master class on performing. I'm going to send you to so-and-so once a month to to do your performing stuff and to work out blah, blah, blah. Bring people in to do, I love it. Michael Jordan's coach wasn't a pro player. Also, Mary, bringing it home, as if the only valuable reason to sing and study voice is solely for performance. Exactly right. What does that say? If you think that if you didn't have a performing career, you shouldn't be teaching, what does that say about the value of taking voice lessons? That you should only be taking voice lessons if you, oh, yes, Mary, bringing it home. I just, I once met a voice artist and was terrified to take the course, but at the end I realized that no one is like me no matter what degrees or not. Exactly, Valerie, so true. Yes, so true. So I think I've maybe blathered on long enough on all of the so-called barriers that we as an industry have perhaps put up, and also that we as an industry kind of tend to take on, especially us independent voice teachers. We kind of tend to it kind of tends to trickle down a little bit, right? Like we're like, oh, we hear from other folks that maybe, this is the thing, and so then we kind of take it on a little bit. So I want to talk a little bit about what are the actual barriers to being an effective voice teacher. And Valerie kind of alluded to it in her comment. Hi, Kate. I read out your comment earlier, but I wanted to read out the comment here from Vocal Process, which is Dr. Jillian Kays and Jeremy Fisher. You need to be an effective voice user, not a performer. You need to know what it feels like to sing songs, not just make noises, and you need to understand how music works, hear and understand melodic and rhythmic patterns and harmonies, plus an acute ear, good noticing skills, and a warm heart. Yeah. So what are the actual barriers to being an effective voice teacher? The actual barriers to being an effective voice teacher are lots of the things that we've talked about before. Believing that there is one true way. Believing that there is that's the big one for me, is believing that there's one true way to do this thing, to do singing, to be a singer, to teach singing, there's one true style, there's one true healthy thing, believing all of that, and then believing and imposing that belief on our students and through our teaching on our students, right? So that's where we start to cause damage. That's where we're not an effective voice teacher, is when we say the one true way to be a singer, the one true way to make sounds, the one true reason to take voice lessons, the one true way to teach sounds, the one true way to create sounds in the body, the one true way, if that is at the core, that's when we're not an effective voice teacher. If we go into teaching with curiosity, a warm heart, as the folks at Vocal Process said, openness, the understanding that the person in front of you is a whole person, the desire to understand why the person in front of you wants to sing, right? Knowing why the person in front of you wants to sing, why they're taking voice lessons. As I've talked about before, no one ever takes voice lessons just because they want to be a better singer. That is not a thing. That's the thing they're going to say to you, but that's not the thing. The thing is they want to be a better singer because, so that, as Liz Jackson Hearn says, they want to be a better singer so that, or they want to use their voice in a way so that, the reason they're taking voice lessons is never just because they want to be a better singer. That's never the reason. That's the thing they're going to tell you. It's not the reason. So understanding that, so if you are not seeing your students as whole people, if you are not understanding the why of your students, if you are not communicating with students as whole people and working with students as whole people and staying open and staying creative and staying curious, then we have barriers to voice teaching. So the voice teachers I know who are not as effective, or who were not as effective as they could have been as voice teachers when I studied. Those voice teachers were the ones who believed that they were the one true voice teacher for all of the people, believed that they didn't have anything to learn about teaching voice or about the voice, believed that they already knew, yes, it's never the fundamental desire, right? Believed that they knew all of the things they needed to know to teach all of the people all of the things, were not open to what other people and other teachers and other, and what colleagues might have to offer. We're not open to discussion with other colleagues. We're in that mindset of all of the other people around me are not good at this, and I am the only person who is good at this. So the problems happen when the shift is off the student and on themselves, absolutely. Desire is so important when a student can identify that. Yes, it helps us teachers to become collaborators and co-creators, absolutely. Collaborators, Shannon, speak, use your words, Shannon. So that's when we have true barriers to effective teaching. When we believe, that's when we are truly, those are the true barriers to effective teaching. When we believe that we are the one true teacher, or we have the one true way. Voice teaching is not the Highlander. There can only be one. Yeah, no. Voice teaching is, I don't know Highlander very well, so like I've seen like maybe 2 episodes, so I don't really know, but yes, it's not that. And I don't know what would be a good, I'm not sure what a good analogy is. But there's no one true way, right? As soon as we start to think that we're the one true voice teacher who has the one true way or the one true method, and as soon as we are not Game of Thrones, okay, I love that. Courtney for the win. Yeah, as soon as we think that this is Game of Thrones out here, and we're the only people who should be on the throne, or should be working with the throats, that's when we stop being effective voice teachers. That's when we stop. That's when the barriers truly do, when those barriers are actually erected, if you will. Those are the actual barriers. TLDR, too long didn't read. The summary is this. Amen. Thanks, Kate. Yeah, the summary is this. Oh. I don't know, something weird is happening over here on Facebook. There we go. The summary is this, that if you are coming into the voice studio right now, you're a voice teacher. Oh, my pleasure, Courtney. If you are coming into the voice studio right now and there are things about your teaching or things about your training, or you feel that there are some things that are disqualifying you in some way to being an effective voice teacher, I would love for you to rethink those things. I would love for you to examine whether they are actually barriers or not to being an effective voice teacher. And I would love for you to consider, well, what would it take for me to feel like that thing is not a barrier? So, as I said before, if you feel like your piano skills are a barrier, and I'm here to tell you that they likely aren't, but if you feel like they are, there are ways that you can. There are folks out there who will help you to become a better voice, a better piano player for teaching voice. You can also take up guitar, or you can. Yeah. So if there's something, if you feel like you are disqualified from being an effective voice teacher because you you didn't do a Western classical degree, well, why don't you go take some voice lessons with someone who is a Western classical singer or expert in teaching Western classical? You can do that. I'm here to tell you it's not a barrier, but if you feel like it is, you can, oh, can I include some of those names in the chat? Valerie, I can't necessarily on Instagram. I can on Facebook. You know what? I'll do a separate post with some resources for overcoming some of those barriers. Yeah, I'll do a separate post. That's a great idea, Valerie. Yeah, thanks. Or you can take, if you feel like you didn't get, that you're disqualified from being a voice teacher because your music reading skills aren't where you would like them to be. Okay, I'm here to tell you you're not disqualified, but if you feel like that's a thing, there are folks out there who will gladly help you to increase those skills. It's just a skill. You can learn it. It's no biggie. And if you feel that you are disqualified from teaching voice because you don't have a degree, you didn't do a voice ped undergrad, blah, 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 whatever the other thing is there's lots of educational stuff out there now that we have access to. Obviously, I have lots of stuff out there now. The voice ped degree is coming in September. But there are lots of folks out there with terrific programs where you can learn specific skills around teaching and around teaching specific kinds of sounds and around teaching, maybe some of the things that you didn't get in your undergrad degree if you did an undergrad degree. So let me just say, these aren't barriers. You're not disqualified. If you are starting to teach and you feel that you're maybe disqualified from teaching because you haven't taught yet, which find a mentor, find a teaching mentor, take some of my courses, take some of the practicums that are out there, do some teaching with someone who is going to, who can help you to start off on the right foot in your teaching. No biggie. That's a doable thing. Of course it is. So all of these things are first of all, not barriers, and secondly, yes. And secondly, the Vocal Instrument 101 is out there, yeah. So first of all, they're not barriers. And secondly, there are ways to feel like you're not disqualified. You can change. All of those things are changeable and doable. Let me see here. Collaboration between voice teachers, the competition mindset. Yeah, turning that into cooperative so we can all work together. Yes, it's beneficial for everyone. The one true way is the worst way. I agree. And Allison says, yes, anytime a different style of music has come my way, I've embraced it and directed and learned how to expand. Yes, and dissected and learned how to expand my knowledge. Ended up doing so many things I never pictured myself doing. Joys of a small town. Yes, and it's all gone into my teaching. Oh, absolutely. Allison, this is part of the thing too, you know, if you're in a small town and you're the one teacher in that small town, guess what? First of all, we're online now, everything. So you can have access to all the things you need. Even in that small town, right? You're going to be the person, and that's totally fine. And you can find a mentor online where it's so good. We're so good. And then the second thing, so first of all, it's not actually, you're not disqualified from teaching voice. And second, you can figure out a way to turn the things that you perceive are weaknesses into strengths. Absolutely. And third, keep in mind what the actual barriers are to being an effective voice teacher. The actual barrier is when we start to have that mindset around the one true way, and the one true voice teacher, and the one true sound, and the one true breathing method, and the one true thing. So as soon as we start to have that mindset, that's when we're actually in barrier land. That's where we start to be perhaps, maybe not disqualified, but that's where we start to be not as effective as we could be. All right. That's that for today. Thank you so much, Valerie, for the idea. I'm going to, I'll create a post maybe over the weekend, but maybe next week with resources for ways to feel like those, ways to find some new skills or to increase your skills. Some resources for those kinds of things. Yes, thank you. Happy Friday, Courtney. See you later. Okay, here we go. Let's. I'll see you later. Have a great weekend. Have a great VoicePed weekend.